Pediatrics and we're back with another lecture video on developmental milestones of the pediatric. We have discussed earlier about the growth and development of children, and right now we're going to talk about developmental milestones. And we have mentioned about the different areas of development. So we have the gross motor, visual motor, language, and social adaptive. So we're going to talk about this chronological or the sequence of development from birth to adulthood. So we'll start first with gross motor at birth. So we see symmetric movements in supine position, and the head is flat in prone. So it means when the child or when the baby is on his abdomen, the head is flat. They cannot lift the head yet upon birth. Visually, they fix on an object that is near to them about 1 foot away, and they are alert to sound. So if they hear a loud sound, they wake up, or they look, or they direct their attention to that sound. And for social adaptive skill, they regard to the face. That's why their favorite face on that at that time is the face of the mother, because that is what they usually see. At 2 months old, we see that the head is midline while held in sitting position. They raise their head in prone, so they already try to extend their head when they are on their abdomen, and they begin to lift the chest. With visual motor, they now start to follow past the midline. So dati, nasa gitna lang, they now look at the other sides. For language, they smile in response to touch and voice, especially that of their mother. And of course, they start to recognize their parent. How about at 4 months? So they hold their head steadily. Okay, they support a head lag should supposedly disappear at that time, or start to disappear at least. They support on forearms in prone. So ito yung arm, ito yung forearm. So they can already support. Kapag naka-prone sila, kapag nakadapa sila, they can already support in prone. They roll from prone to supine. So from prone position, they can now roll to supine. So remember, they start na nakadapa sila, and then they umiikot sila na nakapataas na, or supine position. So that is at 4 months. Reach with both arms together, so they can already do that, and hands to midline. Next is they can already laugh. They are oriented to the voice, especially of that of their mother or father. They coo, and they like to look around. So tumitingin na sila sa iba't ibang areas. So at 6 months, what they can do is they sit with support. So pag halimbawa nakaupo ako, when you say support, meron pa siyang tripod position na nakaganyan. So they have to support their body steadily at 6 months. Feet in mouth when they are in supine position. So yung paa nila, they put it in their mouth. So they can do that already at 6 months. So when you see a child doing that, 6 months na siya, okay? So unilateral reach. So dati at 4 months, they have to reach something with both hands. But at 6 months, they can already try to reach with one hand. And then raking grasp, diba? Yung raking grasp yan. Then the transfer object from one hand to the other. Now they also start to produce bubbling sound. Bah, bah, bah. Okay, bubbles. And they recognize that someone is a stranger. So, since they already know what their mother looks like, they recognize na nila if hindi yun yung parents nila. Okay, at 7 months, they can now roll from supine to prone. Kanina, di ba, from nakadapa, titihaya siya, di ba, magsusupine position. At 7 months, from supine position naman, magdadapa siya. And at 7 months, they also start to crawl and start to sit without support. So kanina, kailangan meron siyang tripod position for support. But at 7 months, they start to sit without support. Okay. Now, in learning about developmental milestones, it's very useful for you to make your own mnemonic. So just to give you an example, for this person, he had his mnemonic for 3 months like this. So since they know in 3, they can already hold their head up high. Ano pa? Social smile. So 3, nilagyan niya ng 3, tapos parang nakaka-smile na siya. And then the Moro reflex, di ba? Nag-extend and flex yung kamay niya kapag naggugulat sila. So the Moro reflex will start to disappear at 3 months. So by 4 months, nawawala na siya. Okay, 6 months, they start to roll over. And then they can sit upright but with pelvic support, diba? Meron dapat siyang tripod position. At 7 to 9 months, again, they sit alone with the back straight. So yan, 9. And then 9, parang letter P na pabaliktad, kaya pincer. So pincer gasp is from 9 to 12 months. 9, and then pincer. Now, stranger anxiety, 7. Ayan, parang nag-drawing sila ng number 7 na may eyes. So, they look like a stranger. So, nagkakaroon siya ng anxiety. Natatakot na yung bata. They feel anxious when they are not with, or when they are with someone whom they do not know. 12 to 14 naman, outgoing Babinski disappears. So, remember the reflex I told you? At 12 months, Babinski reflex should disappear already. And at 1 year, the baby cries when you leave from home. So, there is a separation anxiety. Please don't get confused. 7 months is stranger anxiety. 12 to 14 months is separation anxiety. When the mother leaves home, ito na yung iyak sila na iyak, nagwawala sila. Some parents may say, dati hindi naman ganyan yung anak ko, pero ba't ngayon parang iyakin naman na siya pag umaalis ako? Of course, because they have already developed separation anxiety. So sa mga mommies, they have to understand that it's really normal. So at 15 weeks, ayan, they start to walk already. So ang cute ng mnemonic niya, parang may shoes siya na 15 ang nakalagay. Alright, now let's continue. So, when we talk about 9 months old, they start to crawl, pulse to stand, and start to cruise. What do we mean when we say cruise? Ito yung, they try to stand up, and then if there's a table or a cabinet where they can hold on to, lalakad sila na nakahawak sila dun. We call that cruising. So, there is also an immature pincer grasp. Nalala nyo yung 9 na parang baliktad na letter P. And they can hold a bottle and throw object, but not overhand. Hindi pa ganun. They can just throw it like this way. They can start to say mama, dada indiscriminately. They understand the word no. So at 9 months, when you say no, they will immediately stop what they're doing because they understand it. And they also understand gesture. So they play gesture games and explore environment through crawling and cruising. So next, at 12 months, okay, they may walk alone. So they may start to walk alone already at 12 months. And there is a mature pincer grasp. And we start to see crayon marks on the walls, on papers, or on whatever they can put their hands into. Yan, object permanence. So this is a very good concept. Remember my question earlier about peek-a-boo? Yung laro na eat ba, ganon. So, yun, object permanence is actually at 10 months. Meaning that they already have a concept that even if an object is hidden, it is still there. It's permanent. It's just covered by something. So, they know that even if you cover your face, if you remove it, they will still see your face. That's object permanence. What else? At 12 months, they can already say 1 to 2 words other than mama and dada. And they use it already appropriately. They know who is their mother and father already and use that word. They follow one-step command with gestures such as, kain ka na, you eat. So, they already know what to do. They imitate action, and when you call them, they already come running to you. Also, at 12 months or at 1 year old, they already cooperate with dressing. Unlike before that, ang gulo-gulo nila, hindi mo mahirap para ka nakikipag-away pag dadamitan mo sila. But at this point, they already cooperate with dressing. Now, 15 months. What happens at 15 months? They creeps up the stairs and they can already start to walk backward, diba? Initially, at 12 months, they walk alone and then start to walk backward. Ba't kaya, diba? Parang sasalida sila kasi matututo na siyang tumakbo later. So, they scribble and build towers of 2 blocks in imitation. They can already say 4 to 6 words and follow one-step command even if without gesture. Right? So, go to the bathroom. So, they already know. Even if you don't gesture it to them, they'll already understand. They can use a cup and spoon, but this is variable until 8 months of age. And at 18 months, what can they do already? Before pa sila mag 2 years old, they can already learn how to run. So, they can first learn how to walk, and then walk backwards, and then run. Throw objects overhand while standing. So, they can also do that as well. And scribbles and builds towers of 2 blocks. Scribbles spontaneously, builds towers of 3 blocks. And, dal na sila. They can already say 15 to 25 words and knows 5 body parts. Saan ang eyes, nose, ears, mouth? They can already know. They can already answer that at age of 18 months. They can imitate parents in tasks. They see you washing clothes, they also want to do that. Diba, parang ang kulit-kulit nila kasi they are now turning 2 years old or a toddler. And they play in the company of other children. Now, let's go to toddlers naman, 2 years old or 24 months. What can they do? They walk up and down the stairs 1 foot at a time, di ba? Paisa-isa lang, hindi pa nila kaya yung alternately na pag-step up. They imitate a stroke up or down, so you can already teach them strokes or writing a letter, yung connecting the dots. Build towers of 7 blocks, and they now know how to remove clothing. Remember, the first thing that you will learn is how to remove your clothes rather than putting on your clothes. So it's easier to remove the clothes kasi. So language is now 50 words. They have 2-word sentences, and you can already ask them to do 2-step commands. Halimbawa, anak, go to the kitchen and get 1 spoon. So that's 2-step. So next, they use pronouns inappropriately. So when you hear a 2-year-old or a toddler, when they talk, it sounds funny, but it's very normal. Okay, what type of play? We call this parallel play. When you say parallel play, they are seated together. For example, dalawang toddler, they are seated together. They each have their own toys, but they don't interact. That's called parallel play. Parallel because they just sit parallel to each other, but they don't exchange toys or they do not play together. So we call that parallel play. Is that normal? Yes. Okay, now 3 years old. When we say 3 years old, now they can already go up the stairs with alternate feet. And they can pedal a tricycle. Of course, this is not the tricycle na pampasada. Okay, tricycle, because it has 3 wheels, it means meron siyang balancer. Next, they can copy a circle. They can now undress completely. And they learn how to dress partially. So after learning how to remove your dress or clothing, now you will also learn how to put on clothing. Unbuttons and dries the hands. Okay, and more than 250 words is being said already. With 3-word sentences, they now learn plurals and all pronouns. Nakakatawa because if you know how to speak in Ilocano, my aunt and my uncle has tawag nito, nag-alaga sila ng isang bata who already grew up in the States. And then, they taught her of the word ules, or, diba, that's kumot in Tagalog, or blanket in English. So, because of, at her age, maybe she was 3 years old by that time, and she already knows about plural form. He corrected my uncle when my uncle said, oh, you go get that ules. Sabi niya, it's just 1 blanket, so you just call it ole. Wala daw S because it's not plural. So, it's just a funny thing. And since then, they called her ole, and they keep on laughing when they call her that because that is the origin of that word. So, they can use all pronouns already, and they start to do group play or associative play. When we say associative play, they now start to share or take turns. And during play, they know their full name, their age, and gender. So, sasabihin nila, ako po si Ma Angelica Agatha, I'm 4 years old, ganon. So, at 4 years old, okay, alternate feet going downstairs naman. So, remember, they learn first how to go upstairs, packet muna, before they learn how to go downstairs. At 4 years, they learn to hop and skip. Copy a square. Okay, they can now button clothing. Nagsusuot na sila ng sarili nilang damit and can already dress completely. They can even catch a ball at this age. They know the different colors. They can recite songs from memory. This is very, very apparent. Lalo na pag you let them watch videos, magugulat ka because you already know the lyrics of the song, even if it's a very new song to them. They also start to ask questions. Okay, they play cooperatively and they tell tall tales. So, conforme yung imbento na kwento. Kasi imaginative sila at that moment. So, they already have cooperative play. At 5 years old, they can already perform skips alternating feet. Okay, so jumps over lower obstacles, and they copy a triangle. They can tie their shoes, spread with knife, okay, pag magpapalaman ng tinapay, and then Prince's first name. So, for example, yung pamangkin ko, ang nickname niya kasi Tata. So, she can now, pag tinanong ko anong pangalan mo, T-A-T-A, and then kaya niya nang isulat. So, ask what a word means. They answer all the what, when, where, why question. They can tell a story, play pretend. Okay, kunwari sila si Flash. So parang feeling nila super fast din sila. And then they know the alphabet. So they abide by the rules and likes to help in household tasks. So you have to let them. Okay? So yun po yung ating developmental milestone. Now, we have hard dentition sa ngipin naman. So what do we know about the dentition of children? So there is the beginning of hard tissue formation starting at the age of 4 months. But how do we compute? Paano malalaman po, Doc, kung kailan ba siya dapat magkangipin? So remember, class, that at age 6 months, they start to develop or nagkakaroon sila ng teeth. So the number of teeth is computed by the age in months. For example, the child is already 10 months or the baby infant is 10 months old. You just subtract 6 and then you'll know how many teeth are expected he or she will have. So pag 10 months, they're expected to have at least 4 teeth already. Remember, girls start to have tooth eruption earlier than boys, and the primary teeth are the central incisors, yung nasa gitna. Here. So central incisors, particularly the lower central incisors, are the first one to erupt first. Permanent teeth erupts at age 6 to 7.5 years old. Or pag nag-grade 1, diba, natatanggalan na ng ngipin, at grade 1, nag-start na tayo magkaroon ng permanent tooth or teeth. And usually, these are our first molars, yung dito, and incisors. So this is a table showing us the different dentition and when does it occur. So at 6 to 12 months, first that shows is incisors or our central and lateral incisors. So temporary teeth ito, so 2 to 8. And then at 12 to 15 months, the first molar, hindi moral to, first molar. And then canine, susunod yung canines, and then secondary molar. I want to emphasize at 6 to 7 years old, nagkakaroon na tayo ng permanent teething. So I have our first permanent molars. And then the replacement of temporary teeth will follow. So take note, class, the temporary teeth, the maximum number is 20, while ang permanent teeth natin is 32. Okay. Weight. So when we talk about the weight, as we have mentioned earlier, we have to know what is the average birth weight and how does the weight develop. So at less than 6 months, this is how we're going to compute it. For example, we get the age in months, halimbawa 5 months, times 600 plus the birth weight. That is the, estimated weight. So for example, the age in months is 5 times 600, okay, 3,000 plus, for example, the birth weight is 3,000. Then, we expect that at 5 months, the child is already 5 kilos. Okay? So, ganon. And then at 6 to 12 months naman, how we're going to compute it is age in months. So, for example, 7 months times 500 plus the birth weight. So, that's how you're going to compute it. At 1 to 6 years old, age in years times 2 plus 8. So these are constant numbers, hindi yan nagpapalit. And at 6 to 12 years, so the age in years times 7 minus 5 over 2. So usual changes in weight at different ages. Take note, class, at 4 months, it is expected that the child will double the birth weight. At 2 years old, it will quadruple or 4 times the birth weight. 3 years will be 5 times the birth weight. 5 years old is 6 times the birth weight. At 7 years old, 7 times the birth weight. And at 10 years old, it's 10 times the birth weight. So for example, the birth weight is 3 kilos. We expect that the child at 10 years old will be at 30 kilos already. So these are just estimates, but it's very important for us as doctors or medical professionals later on to be able to estimate. For example, Usong-uso ang online consultation ngayon, and then the mother doesn't know the weight of the child, then we can compute through this. How about the height? So the height will be estimated by the age in years times 5 plus 80. That is in centimeters, but if it's in inches, age times 2 plus 32. So these are constant numbers. The total average gain during the first year is equivalent to 25 centimeters. From birth to 3 months, an average gain of 9 centimeter. 3 to 6 months is an additional of 8 centimeter. 6 to 9 months, 5 cm. And 9 to 12 months, additional 3 centimeters. So there's continuous growth even in height. Now, we have mentioned earlier that there are different types of play. So we have here the age and then the type of play and what is its description. So we're just going to talk about it and explain further. Okay, when we say 0 to 2 years old, ang tawag natin dito ay solitary play. Solo niya. So during this stage, the child will play on their own. For example, they may be in a room full of children but will choose to play blocks on their own. That is solitary play. Hindi yung solitaire, hindi ganon. Okay? Sa pang matatanda lang yon. Next, at 2 to 2.5 years, we call that spectator play. So the child will observe the other children playing. So they will become spectators. So tumitingin-tingin lang sila. And then at 2.5 to 3 years, we call that your parallel play. As I've mentioned earlier, they will sit parallel to each other, but they will not share, they will not play together. At 3 to 4 years old, we call this associative play. Children will be playing with the same game or activity, but will not be working together or making connection with peers. So for example, they're playing together, they're playing dolls, or they're playing cars, but they do not really play together, they still play on their own. While cooperative play at 4 to 6 years old, they will now learn to play with friends or peers. They start to use social skills and interact with their friends. Okay. After that, meron pa bang play? Sinasabi nila sa adolescence daw, foreplay. Hindi yun ha. Parating yan sinasabi ng mga estudyante ko sa akin pag tinanong ko kung anong play, foreplay daw. Hindi yun, class. So, adolescence, pag dumating na tayo dito, there's already rapid change in the body, size, nagkakaroon na tayo ng changes, nagkakaroon na ng development ng breast, ng hair development. So, physiology, psychological, and social functioning also, mabilis na nag-change yan. And hormones that are produced by the body naturally plays an important role. Our estrogen, progesterone, our follicle-stimulating hormone, testosterone, mga ganon. They play an important role. And gender and culture has a profound effect, really. So, now when we talk about the signs of puberty, take note, class, that it will occur earlier for women. So, breast budding. So, agpamukal sa Ilocano, di ba? So, 8 years old, nag-start na yan sa girls, and testicular enlargement naman, which is the first sign of puberty in men or in boys, at 9.5 years. Now, here we discuss class. Next are the classic theories. Take note, there are different theories. We have a psychosexual theory, a psychosocial theory, and a cognitive theory, each of which has stages, and it is correlated with a specific age. So, for example, in infancy, for psychosexual, oral stage, in toddler, anal, phallic, latency, then adolescence. Same with psychosocial. So, iba't iba rin. And we're going to discuss this individually, but I want you to understand on this stage that for infancy, meron siyang psychosocial theory that is oral. At psychosocial, meron tayong trust and mistrust, and cognitive naman is sensory motor 1 to 4. So let's talk about them individually. So for psychosexual theory, I want you to remember it was stipulated by Sigmund Freud. Okay, and there are different focuses on each of the stage, starting with oral, focus on the oral, sa mouth, for infancy. So this is equivalent to provision of food. If you provide food, it is equivalent to love, care, nurturance, and dependency. So for example, imagine an infant not being given with enough milk, enough food, walang oral. What will happen? Okay, what will happen? They will develop oral stagnation. Talagang later on, makikita nyo sila yung mahilig magsigarilyo. Parang parati dapat na merong nakalagay sa mouth nila. Kasi nga, hindi na ibigay yung need nila during that stage. Okay? Toddlerhood, the focus is anal. Ito naman, it is correlated with controlling of power limits. For example, when you toilet train the child or the toddler, if you were too strict, chances are, paglaki nila, they will be very controlling. Kapag naman, hindi mo sila tinoilet train, no toilet training was done, then pagkalaki nila, wala silang din power limits. Burara, they don't know how to control or to lead a certain group or to be organized. Okay? So, yun yung focus pag toddler. Ang preschool naman is audible. So, meron tayong masculinity and femininity dito. So, audible complex. So, makikita natin dito na kapag lalaki yung anak, more inclined sila sa mother, and sa pag babae naman anak, more inclined sila sa father. So, school age is latent. When you say latent, parang natutulog. Okay? Storm of adolescence. Psychosexual, sa school age, very latent yan. Walang masyadong development. Pero pagdating ng adolescence, nagiging genital na sila. Genital na ang focus. So, this is the true genitality. They learn about their genitals and their psychosexual theory. So, as we can see here naman, dito natin makikita from 1 to 3 years old. Ano ba yung characteristic ng 1 to 3 years old? Meron siyang pot belly, sway back, they have longer arms, and short bowed legs. At this stage, kay Erik Erikson naman sa Psychosocial Theory, autonomy versus shame and doubt. Sabi niya, Bonnie, you are such a cute puppy. I'm not sure I appreciate the use of the word where. So, hindi pa nila alam yung mga pag-interpret sa mga words. While for 3 to 6 years old, ito naman sa Erik Erikson, initiative versus guilt, identifying gender role. Pero hindi pa talaga genital ang focus nila. Nutrition is very important for bone growth, especially at this age. And serious nutrient loss could alter bone shape, thickness, and growth. That's why I never turn down a treat. Need to keep my bones healthy. How about 6 to 12 years old naman? So, tingnan nyo dito, 6 to 12 years old, industry versus inferiority, mastering skills that will be needed later as an adult. So, dito na dapat nila aralin talaga, reading, okay, problem solving, etc. They are also building self-esteem and a positive self-concept, taking a place in a peer group. So, yung mga nagde-develop tayo ng friends dito, and adopting a moral standard. Okay. So, for 12 to 19 years old, adolescent stage, searching for identity. Ano ba ako? Babae, lalaki, bakla ba ako? Tomboy ba ako? So, that's the question that you need to answer. Becoming independent from parents. Also, establishing close relationship with your friends. Developing analytic thinking. Hindi na lang siya concrete thinking, but abstract thinking. Evolving value system and developing sexual identity, and you begin to choose a career. So, kay Erik Erikson, identity versus identity confusion. So, adolescents often worry that an occasional homosexual thought or act might mean they are homosexual. So, nagwo-worry sila. But really, sometimes, diba, it's normal to have a girl crush pag sobrang ganda-ganda ka. Parang hindi ka naman ibig sabihin na homosexual ka na, but it's just normal to have that. Now, let's go on to the psychosocial theory. Kanina we talked about psychosexual theory. Now, let's talk about psychosocial theory by Erik Erikson. So, meron akong mnemonic dito which I will teach you later on. But first, I will have this one for infancy class, trust, mistrust. How I memorize it is that the first letter of the stage and then the focus. So, letter T and letter M. So, I, T, p.m. So I'll teach you that later on, pero i-discuss muna natin. So in infancy, the first thing that you need to develop is trust because it will give them the virtue of hope. For example, an infant will need everything from their parents. They cannot get their own food. They cannot clean after themselves kapag nagpupo sila or umihi. If they are sleepy, they cannot put themselves to sleep. So to develop their trust, you have to give everything that they need. Because if not, class, the child will develop mistrust. Okay, then the virtue of hope will not be developed. So trust versus mistrust. This is followed by toddler, autonomy versus shame and doubt. Remember, class, during toddlerhood, a child would want to choose their own dress. For example, even if you prepared the most beautiful dress or the correct pair of socks, they want to choose on their own. So what are you going to do? Mga mommies, what are you going to do? You have to let them choose because you're going to teach them autonomy or independence. If you let them choose, pag kahit nakita na ng mga kumare mo who are very particular with fashion, you just have to explain to them, oh, it's your inaanak, she's the one who chose that, okay? So I'm trying to help her develop her independence. Because if you're going to say, no, don't choose that, ang pangit, they will develop shame and doubt. Okay, and that's bad. All right, let's proceed on preschool stage. We have initiative versus guilt. So at this point, they would want to help with household chores. If they see you washing clothes, they want also to do that. You just let them do that because it will help them develop initiative. Because if not, they will develop guilt. All right? School age. Oh, ito naman. At this point, they will develop industry versus inferiority. And if you do not let them be on their own, work on their own, or if you do not give them commendations or appreciation of what they're doing, they might develop inferiority. Or pag parati mo silang pinapahiya, mga mommy, magkakaroon sila ng inferiority. So adolescents, on the other hand, identity versus role confusion. So it's that at this point that they would have to really learn about themselves. What is their role? What do they want? Okay? So, fidelity naman ang virtue dito. Now, young adult, which is where I belong, diba? Intimacy versus isolation. This is the time na nagkakaroon na ng mga marriage proposal, nagpapakasal na, nagkakaanak na. And if that is not the case, then what will be developed is isolation. But it doesn't mean that if you're single, you don't have a boyfriend, you're in isolation. So, it still means na hindi naman ganun always. Alright, next is middle adult, generativity versus stagnation. The value is care. So, or the virtue is care. So, generativity at this age, this is the time that adults would like to share what they have learned in life to younger generation. So, ito yung mga nakikita natin mga church elders. They want to teach the younger children what to do. So, yun, middle adult, generativity. You want to pass on what you have learned to the younger generation. And of course, old adult, ego integrity versus despair. If a person has this focus, positive focus, achieved all of this, and then when they grow old, they will have integrity. When they meet with their apos, diba, kunikwento nila sa grandchildren nila how their life was, that they had a beautiful life, these are the things that they were able to achieve. They have integrity. But if not, if they were not able to have that, then they will have despair. Okay, so the virtue is wisdom. Now, my mnemonic is this. When I was in college, I tried to remember it this way. ITM, TAS, PIG, C, AIR, E, MGS, OET. And that's it. I can already recite by heart what those words mean. So I hope you create your own mnemonic, or you can also use this mnemonic and then use it to memorize the psychosocial theory. Because I bet you in the board exam, there will be at least one question that will pertain to this theory. Okay, I think naulit yan. Okay, now, let's move on to the cognitive development, which is by Jean Piaget. So, cognitive development, yung pag-iisip natin. So, Piaget believed that children are active thinkers and they are constantly trying to construct more advanced understanding of the world. And these understanding are in the form of structures called schemas. So, pag-aaralan natin yan. So, what are schemas? These are concepts or mental frameworks that people use to organize and interpret information. So, for example, pag may pinag-iisipan ka na bagay, mag-create ka sa utak mo ng way on how you're going to understand it. So, it is a person's picture of the world. Now, first is, under cognitive development, we have what we call your assimilation or accommodation. For example, si Jocelyn, 2-year-old, has learned the schema for dog from her picture books. So, nakikita niya, that is a dog. So, that is her schema for a dog. Now, when Jocelyn sees a cat and calls it a dog, she is trying to assimilate this new animal into an existing schema. Kasi ang unang alam niya na animal is a dog. So, nung nakita niya yung cat, sabi niya dog. She's not wrong. Kasi ang una niya ngang naiisip kapag animal is a dog. So, her mother will tell her that it is a cat. So, she will assimilate that. Okay, now, Jocelyn accommodates her schema for 4-legged animals and continues to modify that schema to include different kinds of dogs and cats in the neighborhood. Okay, that is assimilation. Now, for Jean Piaget, these are the different focus naman of cognitive theory. So, in infancy, we call that sensory motor 1 to 4. So, ibig sabihin, ang pag-aaral ng isang infant is through senses and motor. That's why it's very good to give them textured toys. Diba, yung mga soft, hard, rough, smooth. So, sensory motor kasi yan. So, 1 to 4. And the issues here is that will be encountered is object permanence, which they will later learn at 10 months old that even if they don't see it, an object is still there. Sa toddlerhood naman is sensory motor 5 to 6. So, spatial relations. So, how objects are related to one another in terms of space. Preschool is pre-operational. So, meron dito yung egocentrism. We'll discuss more about this. So, egocentrism, ibig sabihin nito, they just think about themselves. If they have a toy, they just want the toy for themselves. If they have a food, they just want it for themselves. Is that normal? Yes. So, we call that pre-operational thinking. At school age naman, concrete operational or concrete thinking. They learn how to add, subtract, divide, but for abstract reasoning, they still do not know it. So, hindi pa nila alam. Pag halimbawa tanungin mo, aanhin pa ang damo kung patay na ang kabayo, they will take that literally. Patay na yung kabayo, so wala nang kakain ng damo. So, but for an adolescent who has already developed formal operational thinking, they will already know that it does not literally mean na walang kakain ng damo, but it means that something is parang sayang kasi nga hindi na siya magagamit. So, it's not just, they do not just take it very literally anymore. So, in the sensory motor stage, as I've mentioned earlier, isa-isahin natin, information is gained through the senses and motor action, and the child will perceive and manipulate, but they do not know how to reason out yet. Makikita lang nila, they like the colors, the texture, and symbols become internalized through language development. So, object permanence, again, as I've mentioned earlier, this is the knowledge that an object continues to exist even if it is hidden or it cannot be seen by them. Yan, yung peekaboo. So, sabi natin, before 6 months, infants act as if objects removed from sights cease to exist. So, pag hinulog nila yung ball at di na nila nakikita, akala nila wala na yon. But at 10 months, as I've mentioned earlier, okay, sorry, what's that? What happened? Let's just go back to it right here. Okay, yan. So, this is another picture of object permanence. See, for example, they have mentioned a stuffed toy and then you cover it. If the child is less than 10 months, wala pa siyang concepts of object permanence. The child may cry kasi baka wala na yung stuffed toy. But if they already know object permanence, they know that even if it's removed, it still exists. Okay, pre-operational stage at 2 to 7 years old. The word operation refers to logical mental activities. Thus, pre-operational stage is pre-logical. They don't have logic yet. They can understand the language but not the logic. So, symbolic thought. They have the ability to use words, images, and symbols to represent the word. That is pre-operational stage. When you say centration class, this is the tendency to focus or center on only one aspect of a situation, usually a perceptual aspect, and ignore the other relevant aspects of the situation. Like for example, if you ask them to share their toy with another child, they can only focus on their own situation but not to that situation of the other child. So pinapagalitan mo, dapat mo naman, ayaw mo mag-share. But in actuality, they have this tendency to focus on only one aspect of the situation. This is same with egocentrism. They cannot take another person's perspective or point of view, so they don't want to share their food or toys. They cannot understand it yet. So, as the adult, you have to be the one to understand them. Irreversibility. The child cannot mentally reverse a sequence of events or logic operations back to the starting point. So in 2 to 7 years old, for example, if something was broken, they cannot have the logic to how to mentally reverse it or the sequence of events. Or for example, they went from one point to the other, they cannot reverse that thought yet. And they lack the concept of conservation. What is conservation? Okay, something is wrong with my laptop. Alright, before going to conservation, we first have egocentrism. So as we mentioned earlier, this is the child's inability to take another person's point of view. So for example, if the child on the phone says, "See the picture I drew for you, Grandpa." So may pinapakita siyang picture. Lolo, ito yung picture na drawing ko. So they are not able to understand that their grandpa cannot see that object because he's not there. So since they think that that is they think na nakikita rin ng grandpa nila yun. So that's egocentrism. Okay, conservation. So when we talk about conservation, this is an understanding that certain properties remain constant despite the change in their form. So in the pre-operational stage, they cannot understand this yet. So for example, mass, volume, and number. So when you take a look at this picture, for example, in the number, for a child in preschool or in pre-operational stage, for example, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, we count that as 10. Here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It's the same number, right? But if we show this to a preschooler who is in pre-operational thought, they would think that this number of coins is higher than this one because of how they are spaced. Okay? They don't understand the theory of conservation yet. Another example, in length. So for example, here we have two sticks with equal size, and here also with equal size, but in a different arrangement, or they're not parallel together. We would think that this is the longer one. Okay. And in substance, for example, here, this is a crumpled paper, another crumpled paper, and also this one. But this one, it's not so crumpled. It was not crumpled into a ball. So they would think that this has more substance than this one because of its length. Okay? So another example would be this. If you transfer the content of the beaker to that of a test tube, which is actually the same content, they would think, but since this one has a higher, it will look that it has a higher, because how do I say this? Mas mataas kasi ito, the water level is higher here versus this one, the beaker. They would think that this has more water. So that is the theory of conservation, which is not yet understood by a child in the pre-operational development of cognition. Okay, so this is just a summary of the tests for various types of conservation. Now, let's move on to the concrete operational stage. This is the ability to think logically about concrete objects and situations. They can now understand conservation. Pag tinanong mo, anong mas mabigat? 1 kilo ng bato o 1 kilo ng cotton? Alam na nila, ma'am, pareho naman palang 1 kilo, the same lang po sila. So classification and categorization, they become less egocentric. They can now understand the situation of other people. And but still, they have the inability to reason abstractly or hypothetically. If you say, anong meaning ng there's no use crying over spilt milk, they will literally interpret that, Doc, wala na, naitapon na, hindi mo na mainom. So sayang, huwag ka nang umiyak. So they don't understand the deeper meaning of that yet. And last, we have the formal operational stage. This is ability to think logically about abstract principles and hypothetical situations. So there's hypothetical deductive. Let me just go back to that portion. We are almost done with the lecture. So, ability to think logically about abstract principles and hypothetical situation. Mga what if na problems. What if ganito yung nangyari? What if ganito? So, they can already think of possible consequences. And adolescent egocentrism is illustrated by the phenomenon of personal fable and imaginary audience. Okay. Now, that's the cognitive theory. Punta naman tayo, class. This is a very interesting topic. Moral development. So, this is by Kohlberg. Sabi nung Bird, I didn't do it. Di po ako gumawa niyan pag merong kasalanan, halimbawa, di ba? So, when we say moral development, we are trying to determine what's right and wrong. So, this is the gradual development on the concept of right and wrong, conscious religious values, social attitudes, and certain behavior. It is a stage theory, and they do not automatically move from one stage to the next as they mature. This is how different it is with the other theories. Depende pa rin yan. How a certain person develop morally. Kaya kahit na yung mga iba, adolescent na sila or adults na sila, hindi pa rin na-develop yung moral development nila. Hindi nag-develop morally because of a lot of factors that we could consider. A person in stage 1 can understand stage 2 reasoning but nothing beyond that. Ano ba yung stages? So, meron tayong pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional development. So, let's talk about those individually. So, at 0 to 9 years old, ito dapat yung pre-conventional. So, stage 1 is obedience and punishment. Anong ibig sabihin nun? A child, 0 to 9 years old, will obey the rule for them to avoid the punishment. They already have a sense of what is right and wrong. Alam na nila yan. And alam nila kung anong mapapunished or hindi. Kapag tumakas ka sa klase, halimbawa, or hindi ka nag-aral, alam nila kung anong punishment. They obey superior authority and allow that authority to make the rules, especially if that authority has the power to inflict pain. Diba? Kaya nga pagpapaluin mo sila, alam nila authority ka talaga. If you have the power to inflict pain to them, they recognize you as authority and they will allow you to set rules. And they are responsive to the rules. So this is pre-conventional morality. Now, stage 2 is naively egotistical. What do we mean by that? Naively, anong tawag natin doon? Naive, di ba? They are motivated by vengeance, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth philosophy. They are self-absorbed while assuming that he or she is generous. Yan, they believe in equal sharing in that everyone gets the same regardless of need. Hindi pa nila maintindihan yung concept of equity, that even if meron na sila nun, if there is something to be given to them, it should have to be given equally. So they do not get that yet. And they believe that the end justifies the means. So if they did something bad but their end result is good, so pre-conventional morality yan. Parang kay Robin Hood, di ba? nagnanakaw siya pero binibigay niya sa mahihirap, the end justifies the means para sa kanila. So, preconventional morality actually yun. They will do a favor only if they can get one in return. And they expect na meron silang reward for every non-selfish deed that he or she does. So, that is stage 2 or naively egotistical, sorry. So, now let's move on to conventional morality. So, this is expected at 10 to 15 years of age. So, stage 3, meron silang good boy or good girl orientation, meaning they find that approval from peers, especially from peers, are very important. Pag nagustuhan sila ng mga kaibigan nila, then yun ang naging basis nila of morality. They feel that intentions are as important as deeds and expect others to accept intentions or promises in place of deeds. So pag nag-promise sila to do something good, they expect na okay na yun, even if they do not put it into action kasi sinabi naman nila na yun ang gusto nilang gawin for them. And they begin to put themselves in another shoes and think from another perspective, meaning they now start to learn about empathy. Alright. Now, stage 4, on the other hand, is law and social order. They are a duty doer who believes in rigid rules that should not be changed. They respect the authority without question. So, itong stage na to, talagang nakikinig sila. They support the right of the majority without concern for those in the minority and is a part of about 80% of the population that does not progress past stage 4. Imagine, class, 80% of the population will not progress past stage 4. So, dito na sila, law and social order. Anong sinabi, kailangan mong i-obey. Di na sila mag-iisip kung tama man yun or mali. Basta pag pinagdesisyonan ng majority, yun na. Huwag mo nang, parang di na nila kinoconsider ang minority. Now, let's move on to the higher level of morality. Post-conventional morality or stage 5, legalistic social contract. What does this mean? They are motivated by the belief in the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. Ganda, di ba? They believe in consensus. Dapat everyone will agree rather in majority rules. So when you say consensus, ang pagkakaiba nito, you will try to do compromise. Magko-compromise ka in order for everyone to agree. You respect the rights of the minority, especially the rights of the individual, and believe that change in the law is possible but only through the system. Okay. So maganda, di ba? Very, very, nagiging ideal na siya. Stage 6, which is the last stage, is universal ethical principle. They believe that there are high moral principles than those represented by social rules and norms. And they are willing to accept kung anong consequence for disobedience of that social rule if they do not accept it or if they have rejected it. And they believe that the dignity of humanity is sacred and that all humans have value. So, ang ganda. If we could just all achieve the stage 6 post-conventional morality, then I think the world will be a better place to live in. Okay? So, I think, that's the last part of the lecture. Thank you so much for listening to this video.